Margaret hears voices in her head. They counsel her, they understand, they talk to her. And these rules and this regiment are designed to keep her safe. She has an 18-year-old daughter named Abby. She wants to be safe, but there is a strange man named David Moore that was in her life, and he has come back to cause a ton of crazy strife. She hears darkness calling. There are people falling. She is cracking under all this pressure. She hears voices in her head. They counsel her. They understand. They talk to her. And she's losing her goddamn mind. She cannot help this time. They talk to her. Resurrection is a Shudder exclusive, and after that terrible, terrible, terrible rendition of Randy Orton's Voices, and yeah, if you are a non-wrestling fan, you have no idea who I'm talking about. This, again, is a Shudder exclusive, written and directed by Andrew Simmons. I'm going to say Simmons because if it's Siemens, then I'm going to laugh uncontrollably because Siemens is funny. It's just funny when Siemens is just firing something off. Nevertheless, Andrew Simmons, who did a movie called Nancy Please, which I understand was also what Chris Benoit said on June 23rd, 2007. Oh, this review's going well. So this movie pretty much centers around its lead, Rebecca Hall, who plays Margaret. I've loved Rebecca Hall since The Awakening. She was great in Godzilla vs. Kong. I loved her in The Night House. The Night House was one of the best psychological thriller, suspense, horror movies in quite a while because it was low budget in a good way and relied on her just telling her story through expression and at times very little dialogue. And that's actually kind of the case here. Now, Rebecca Hall gives a powerful performance as a mother, Margaret, that had some strife in her past that gets revealed later in the movie. And basically, she has a regimented life. She has a business that she works for. It does some kind of weird engineering stuff. It's kind of a little bit up in the air. She has a daughter named Abby, who is played by Grace Kaufman. I imagine not related to Andy, considering that Andy Kaufman has been dead since 1984. It'd be very, very difficult for her to be not, well, that closely related. Nevertheless, Michael Esper plays Peter, who's a bit of a fling for Margaret, shall we say. And Gwen, Gwyn, Angela Wong Carbone, who I would like to see in more movies because I think she did a really good job stealing at least a few scenes she was in. And also Tim Roth. Tim Roth makes an appearance in this, and basically here's the idea, or the story without getting into spoilers. Essentially, Margaret had a certain thing that happened earlier in her life with an older guy, and has since moved on from that and has a regimented life where she just wants to keep herself and her daughter safe. And once she sees this past relationship, this past person, who, by the way, is played by Tim Roth, enter her life suddenly around town after not seeing him for many, many years, she does everything she can to keep her family safe and keep her sanity as it slowly drifts away. She closes her eyes and it drifts away. Obviously, there's more, and that will come up in the spoilers, but this movie lives and dies on Rebecca Hall's performance. Now, I will say, compared to other movies that Rebecca Hall's been in, especially when she's been the figurehead, like The Awakening or The Night House, and a few others, but those two in particular leap out in my mind. Those are better than this. Unfortunately, Rebecca Hall, while she is a great actress, a tremendous actress. In fact, you put her name on the marquee or in the cast. I mean, I don't really think they do that many marquees anymore. I will absolutely watch it because I think she's been great for a number of years. I should go back and watch some of her stuff before The Awakening. I've seen everything she's in, but I, by and large, will watch something if I know that she's in. I decided to watch this when it was on Shudder, and she's really good. She's really good. Everybody else varies from okay to Tim Roth. I honest to God, thought that Tim Roth died a few years ago, in all honesty. He's all right in this. The movie does a good job building itself for a while, building the suspense, building all that. The problem is this movie, and it basically is about relationships, psychological damage, the impact that can have on people's lives, and do they really ever escape them, or does it haunt people? Does it haunt them forever? Can they truly escape their past? Can they truly escape any bad things they may or may not have done? These things are explored. It tries to go a bit bonkers towards the end, and actually I would say pretty much in the last 40 minutes. Some of it works, some of it doesn't. Again, Rebecca Hall is pretty much the driving force behind this, and had they had really a lot of, like 80% of actresses in a role like this, not that there aren't plenty of talented women out there, I don't know if this would have been as good. In fact, I could pretty much say it probably wouldn't have been. Rebecca Hall helps elevate this movie that ends up being all right. A bit above average, I will say that, but it doesn't end up being as great as I think it could have been, because I think it tries to do it. It tells its story through, some impactful images, and does rely on Rebecca Hall to carry it with expressions. And is she losing her mind? Is this really in her head? What exactly is going on? It leaves it open to interpretation, even though it is pretty obvious early on that there is some shit going on here, and that since she's only able to see some of this stuff, it's pretty obvious that she's actually, that some stuff isn't necessarily right, and that maybe her past is coming back to haunt her, and that karma's coming back to get her. And all these things are explored. Unfortunately, I don't think it fully... and there's nothing wrong with not fully explaining movies. I just don't think it fully explains enough, and then just tries to say, okay, this is what we're doing. We're going to do this. Or it doesn't explain it in the best way. Leaving stuff open to interpretation is fine, but this isn't one of the better... This is not one of the best movies that Rebecca Hall was in, unfortunately. It ends up having some good dialogue. It ends up having... There's this one particular scene. It's like 7 minutes of Rebecca Hall explaining all this stuff that happened to her, and what led to this stuff going on, whether it's in her head or really happening. And it's incredible, just like one take, multiple take. I'm not exactly sure, but she's explained it to an intern that she's also been kind of mentoring and also doing some therapy for, because she's in an abusive relationship that kind of mirrors something she went through. And it's an incredible performance, an incredible, scene right there. That's the kind of stuff that this movie really nails. When it tries to get into the horror elements, it doesn't click. It doesn't click as much as it should. Not like The Night House, not like The Awakening. But Rebecca Hall definitely elevates it above what it would normally be. So I am going to get into spoilers here in a bit, but it is on Shudder. You could absolutely check it out. Shudder is a great streaming service. No, I'm not sponsored. Wouldn't mind being sponsored, but why would they sponsor a small show like this? Just a movie fan, a wrestling fan talking. Anyway, getting into spoilers. 3, 2, 1, and spoilers. Okay, so the whole thing is she has her daughter Abby. She's worried about keeping her safe. She is having an affair. Margaret is, Rebecca Hall's character, is having an affair with a married co-worker. And that's kind of keeping her active, as far as the sex goes. I think that's what the kids call it. And as more stuff happens, she sees Tim Roth come into her life. He basically explains, well, at first he plays off like he didn't know her. And then he says, oh, by the way, your son's still alive. Our son's still alive. He's inside me. What do you mean he's inside you? What the hell? How the hell would that work? And as things go on, she explains in this particular dialogue scene to Gwen that she was on holiday with her parents. She did drawing. She met this older guy. And this guy would have things called kindnesses. Basically, certain things would be, if she did things the right way, he would show kindness to her. It was a way to control her, and that's pretty much it. A controlling relationship, all that stuff. And that's where she was trying to help Gwen, because Gwen was talking about, a boyfriend or a guy she was interested in would make, jokes, and it seemed like he might have been making fun of her, but she wasn't exactly sure, but she was uncomfortable by it, but she couldn't take the joke. That's what he was saying, a way to control. And that whole thing of control kind of gets knocked in your head. Nevertheless, Tim Roth's David, no, that's Jason. It tries to get her to just do more and more stuff. But is he just in her head? That's one of these things right here. Because Margaret continues to lose it, continues to just, have a fractured relationship with Abby. Abby has, Peter show up, the co-worker, and they try doing intervention, and Abby basically decides eventually, because her mother's losing it, and her mother's getting very catastrophically crazy. She's like, I gotta leave. I can't do this anymore. And Margaret continues to slide down further into depression, craziness, just losing it, absolutely losing it, because of all the trauma she went through. And It turns out that she had a son with this guy who didn't want to take he didn't want to take care of the kid, and the kid ended up disappearing at one point because she never thought she could love something other than herself or somebody other than David, because he was controlling her, grooming her, that kind of stuff, because there was a massive age difference. And then the kid disappeared at one point. He says, "Oh, the kid's inside me," and then she ran away. Now, it could have actually been that she ran away from the responsibility, left the kid there with him, and the kid died. Or she ran away from responsibility, the kid died anyway. Or she ran away because the kid died. There's a whole bunch of ways to interpret all this stuff because you don't know if she's telling the truth, David's telling the truth, or if the screenplay's telling the truth. And it ends up being something that's kind of open-ended, leaving stuff up to interpretation. And eventually, she confronts David in a hotel room, and they get in a bit of a knife fight because she's got a knife taped to her wrist and a knife taped to her arm. I don't know what, or to her leg. I don't know why I looked at my other arm when it was a leg. They cut like a knife, and then she eventually decides to kill him, and then cut out the baby. And I saved you. But it turned out what ended up happening is she probably took her own life, even though we didn't see that, because Abby is going to college. She holds the kid. The Mariner may not actually have ever been a thing. And then she takes off, and it turns out that Margaret is in the afterlife, possibly, or in a mental institution. Again, there are things that just happen and things that just get thrown out there where I don't need everything explained to me. I mean, there's certain things, certain allegories that can be figured out. This one just tried to have a focus and then, splintered off in a bunch of directions. And I don't think made the most of Rebecca Hall's performance, and everybody else is fine. So I'm going to give it a B- for Rebecca Hall's performance and a couple of the others. And for the idea, it has some nice little ideas. I just don't think the execution was as good as it could have been. Anyway, agree, disagree what I said. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Rickland. I'll see you soon.